Besides, the one is longer. You could use both.
Better done. It's easier to understand.
I think anybody can
Wikipedia
write
is
from
easier?
Wikipedia,
Oh, yeah.
too.
Yeah. It's, by the way, if you have trouble with the English that normally comes up, you could actually go to Simple English. I remember years ago when Sarah Palin was our governor, I went to Wikipedia and they had a nice page on Sarah Palin, and I noticed there was Simple English, and I clicked on it and it gave you like a third of that size of a document. Simple English. For folks that speak English as a second language. Think about it, so it's kind of handy. But in any case, even though I don't say it in any of the recommended readings and so on, I highly recommend using an encyclopedia like Wikipedia to check the specific philosopher over first, just to get an idea of how he looked. Obviously, he looked like he was made out of stone.
Looks like you.
I think philosophy does that to a person. At least if you live long enough. So I highly recommend that, actually. Live long enough. But notice he died in 399 BC. What does BC stand for?
Before Christ.
Before Christ. What about BCE? Have you ever heard that? Before the Common Era, which is actually the same time period. It's no difference. It's just that people are trying to remove the idea of Christ being involved. You know, if you're yeah. But clearly the Greeks didn't feel like time was going backwards, so by the time he died, he wasn't younger than he was when he. No, you can't do that. Right? Not a good joke. Nobody laughed at that one. Never use that joke again. Okay. How old was he?
About 71.
Approximately 71. So yes, I've already beaten Socrates. Because I'm 74, so I beat him by 3 years so far. That's pretty cool. I'm working on Plato. Plato was in his 80s. The ones that really get me are people like Bertrand Russell, he was like late 90s. John Dewey, he was late 90s. So I'm hoping to outlast all of them. However, all right, so read the encyclopedias on them. I won't go over them, but do that. And now here's the interesting thing that has to come up. Socrates is the main character in Plato's dialogues, almost all of them. But Plato is the one who writes them. Socrates is not the author, right? But their dialogues, they're kind of like plays, dialogues between different individuals. So it's in a way like a play where you go to the audience is sitting around and you have the different actors all reading the lines or speaking the lines. So you can imagine it working out that way. And what they're doing is defining different virtues and things. And the apology is the actual trial of Socrates. Did you have a chance to read it? I hope, some of you. The interesting thing for me too is Apollo is a god. And in fact, if you see how Socrates defends himself, why is Apollo involved? Anybody catch it? He blames Apollo for the trouble he's in. Yes, David.
Who's the oracle? I was having problems with that.
The oracle is in Delphi.
Does it have to do with Apollo?
Pardon?
Does it have to do with Apollo? Because it's an oracle for the gods, right?
Yes. It's in a particular location they call the belly button of the world, because it's over a crack where there's fumes coming up, volcanic fumes. And they built a temple there. And in fact, it's a tourist spot. If you go to Delphi.
So when he talks about the oracle telling him that he's the smartest man alive, is that what you're talking about? How he blames Apollo because
Yep.
the oracle spoke for Apollo?
Yes, the oracle is really priestesses sitting on a tripod stool that's sitting over the crack. And so they're sitting there inhaling these volcanic fumes. And the priests, meanwhile, are selling, passes to come in and ask the oracle a question. And what we know is Chaerephon, which is interesting because that means he's the one who hears it, right? He's the one that goes to the oracle and he asks, "Is anyone wiser than Socrates?" And the oracle says, "No." Because she's blotto. I mean, she's, asphyxiated by the fumes.
So you've seen 300, right? Same kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, they're completely out of it. If you think of it, they've been sitting there inhaling these fumes. Some days, according to the records, the priestesses revolted and said, "No working today because the fumes are too thick." So it would be too bad for them, And of course, the priests hated that when that happened because they didn't get any money that day. Right? But in any case, yes, you could actually go there and as a tourist and visit the site. It's ruins now, but you could actually go and see the place and so on. So it's usually the one parking lot is loaded with big buses, the big tourist buses and so on. So lots of people like to go there. And the fumes are still venting there. Kind of like Hawaii, the Volcanoes National Park, if you've ever been around there.
We could try it ourselves.
Yes, you could. I don't think they offer people the job to do that anymore, but maybe they do. I've only visited via Google Earth. That's my favorite way to travel, instead of going there in person. But yeah, it's still there. But Chaerephon comes back to Socrates and tells him, "I asked the god." The priestess is the voice of the god, the oracle. Means the voice, right? And they asked, "Is anyone wiser than Socrates?" And famously, Chaerephon says, "The goddess said no." Or the priestess said no.
I understand how it got him in trouble because then he went around to,
So he wanted to prove that the god was wrong.
and he couldn't do it.
So he went around.
But then he called them stupid. He basically called them stupid.
Well, he clearly
He didn't
insulted
know all the
them.
answers.
Pardon?
I say because he said they were ignorant because he didn't know all the answers, but he came with that, and they claimed to know the answers.
But they were wrong.
Right.
And he demonstrated that through this Socratic debate, just, the way he approached things. And that annoyed the heck out of all these people. And as a result, he's on trial for not being pious, because everybody that's important is mad at him. Right? So yes, and he defends himself. And in retrospect, we all think he clearly demonstrates that he wasn't corrupting the youth. That's their concern, that he's corrupting the youth, because the youth would come and listen to him do that at the different symposia where they're having dinner, and he's talking with these people that usually, their fathers have paid this guy lots of money to train their sons how to argue and so on. And Socrates, who's just a kind of a bum, comes in and basically makes a fool out of them. Really pisses everybody off. So in a sense, it makes sense why he's in so much trouble. But there's a book by actually there's lots of books on Socrates, as you can imagine. 399 BC is when he died. How long ago is that? 2025 plus 399 years, right? So that's a long time ago. So people have been writing books on it. I.F. Stone was a retired reporter who decided for his retirement he was going to learn Greek and read all the classic Greek philosophy and write about it. And he got as far as reading the Apology, and then he died. which is, ooh, that's scary. So don't go do that. But in any case, he at least published this book, and it's pretty neat. And he argues that it wasn't just how angry he made them, they also didn't trust him because of the politics of the day. And you'd have to read the book to get into all of that. I won't try to cover all of that. I also recommend Bettany Hughes. I think I have that in, how did I get into that? I think I mentioned Bettany Hughes. I mentioned lots of people. You're welcome to look at all of these different folks. But Bettany Hughes is good. And she does lots of Bettany Hughes is a British but if you look her up, she has videos that she did for the BBC, and she has some on Socrates. She wrote a book called The Hemlock Cup, and that's about is that a funny page, or is she interesting or not? I don't know. Anybody has anything to say, go ahead. But she does some good videos. She does one on Nietzsche. When we get up to Nietzsche, she does one on Nietzsche, but she also did a book on Cleopatra, on Socrates, so I recommend her if you're interested in that. However, okay. Well, let's get back to Plato for a minute. I'll go to, again, the Wikipedia. The reason I'll mention him is, remember, he's the author of the dialogues, including the Apology. The Apology is supposed to be accurate. How do you know, right? No one's around who was there. But there are other copies or other versions of the Apology which are actually quite similar. So there's that, right? It's not like there's 4 Gospels, but there's at least 2 apologies out there. And yes, apology, by the way, how many folks have ever made an apology to anybody? So you get to see where that comes from. And it's a defense. Apollo, APO, means of or from, and LLO is logos. So in other words, it's thanks to reason. Apollo is the god of reason, right? And so this is the reason I behave this way. So in a sense, when you're giving someone an apology, you're explaining the reason for it. So Apollo, you're invoking the god Apollo, essentially, when you're giving somebody an apology. Plato is the main author that we go to for Socrates, and we believe that there was a first third of his works were very accurate. So in those works, Socrates is an asshole and asks questions of these people that piss them off royally because he makes them foolish. And as a result, they're mad at him. One of the other dialogues is the Euthyphro. Let's go to the Euthyphro for a minute. You could go to the Wikipedia, or you could go to the internet. I think I mentioned this is a good one also to read. And if you think about it, this is, I think last class, David, you asked, is this associated with the Apology? And it was, because they're standing outside waiting for their trial to start. Euthyphro is ahead of Socrates, and Euthyphro is a priest. And as a priest, he knows what pious means. And Socrates, of course, he's charged with not being pious. So he says, at least if you teach me how to be pious, when I go in there, I can defend myself and say, I'm taking lessons from Euthyphro. So I'll be good. I promise. I'll learn my lesson here. So I won't be bad and be impious anymore. So Euthyphro, teach me how to be pious. And pious is doing what the gods love, says Euthyphro. That's the definition, the starting definition. That's kind of interesting. You know, he's looking for the definition of something, right? So pious. How do I be pious? Do what the gods love. Well, if you're familiar with the Greek gods, there's lots of them. Zeus, for example, is a philanderer. I mean, Zeus, if you think about how many different women did Zeus rape, you know, there's stories about all of them. I guess the artist's favorite one is the swan. He turned himself into a swan. Should I give you a warning here? Trigger warning? So notice the swan is raping women.
What I say yesterday, just look at their art. You'll understand.
Look at their heart.
Art.
Their art.
Sculptures, art.